The Bermuda Triangle. What gives it its mysterious powers? Possibly an asteroid that landed 11,000 years ago that had a special magnetic property? Or possibly just human error of equipment? Or possibly great waves of destruction that naturally occurred? Or even just magnetic scales gone wrong? Or even possibly UFOs, the work of aliens? Or is it methane hydrate, the dangerous chemical so explosive? Or was it pirates waiting in the Pacific, pillage and steal? Or maybe the secret of Atlantis? I will discuss this and much more. Let's begin with Atlantis. One area of reference, the only reference, but very solid reference from Plato, back in the early 230 BC century. This taking place long after Pangaea, described in his story by a character that in references has been proven to exist, named Critias. Critias in the story was telling it to his grandson. He was simply comparing the great pharaohs of Egypt to another equal, highly advanced race. It is in fact said that the destruction of Atlantis was done so overnight by one combination of tsunamis and waves and earthquakes that split it into pieces and then crushed it beneath the sea. And now with hearsay of the Bohemian Islands, where there is a track, a sort of pieces of land, all dismembered, but laid out like a path that resemble a road of sorts. And this road, insequentially, is right off the edge of Florida as well. Nearly 60 miles away. Fairly close. A little too close if you ask me. First off, the plates are dated back to roughly only 2,000 years ago, 2 or 3,000 years ago, which was more along the lines of the time when Plato wrote about said Atlantis, rather than these being the findings of such a place. But if you take a look into the research of 1970 of the Bahamas, there was actually a pyramid discovered by Dr. Ray Brown, who was in fact accompanied by 4 other divers that found roads, bridges, and even mysterious crystals that they believed possibly powered the city using a sort of micro-technology. The pyramid even dates back to Egyptian time, around the time when said Atlantis existed, in which he believes that the crystals themselves actually had miniature pyramids in them. But one speculative important question that's been asked several times is, where are the photos? Why didn't they have a waterproof camera with them? They didn't take anything back with them, and they don't know how they got there because it was in the Bermuda Triangle. You know, you have no way of navigating through. They have no clue where they were. There's actually a sunken city 400 miles off of Portugal, discovered during a Soviet expedition. They found concrete and plastic, like some kind of weird plastic material on buildings, like buildings underwater, basically, towers, basically. And there's also been said marble columns and golden bronze vases that have been found in around the Bermuda Triangle, but not so necessarily so far in. But let's humor the subject and say that Atlantis was in the center of the Bermuda Triangle. What about the Dragon's Triangle? The Dragon's Triangle has absolutely no evidence of any sort of pyramid or any sort of structures that have ever been found in or around it. The Bermuda Triangle happens to be in an area where the current It's not necessarily the focal point here, but it's within the feeder band, sort of. Unlike the Dragon's Triangle over here, where the current is fairly loose and open, and there's not really that much pressure going on. That is the major difference between the Bermuda Triangle and the Dragon's Triangle. Other than that, they're really the same thing with the magnetic disturbance, where things get knocked out of whack. But a little while back, somebody with a satellite found 3 unidentified objects in the Dragon's Triangle, actually, but they were not any sort of UFO or pyramid or anything of an ancient society. They were actually military bases designed by the Japanese army to these are man-made over here, these rock formations to keep seas from overcoming it. And they don't really know what's the main function of the military base, but it's pretty clear that in the Dragon's Triangle there's no dangerous weather, but ships do disappear into it just as much, and there's no terrible weather. A lot of people blame weather, but you gotta look at on the other end of the world, you have the same thing going on, same phenomenon. One of the main reasons why you don't hear about deaths in the Dragon's Triangle is because people don't tend to travel out by boat like they do over here in South Florida and Cuba, where it is easy to get a boat and just jump out into the ocean. It's not as easy over there. So there's actually a lot less people going into the triangle itself, but it's just as dangerous. So to think that there's possibly Atlantis in the center of our Bermuda Triangle still requires a lot more evidence. Every day people go into the Bermuda Triangle and get killed. It's become just such a common thing that people really don't discuss it that much anymore. It doesn't seem like that much of a phenomenon because people are constantly going out in their little dinghies and their ships are getting taken under. One of the things that in other studies they have realized that can actually take a ship down underwater is methane hydrate that could come out from underneath tectonic plates. Now, tectonic plates are those plates moving that shape our continent and such, and that will also affect our currents as well. And the methane hydrate is a sort of gas that comes out from the earth that is very flammable, but at the same time it remains sort of like as a crystal coming off of like a crystal, like a rock. And the rock itself is very explosive, easily ignited, and very volatile. Hard, difficult conditions to live in. Most of them are at bombing temperatures that we cannot survive. The gas is believed to bubble up to the top of the water and go into the air and possibly disrupt the channeling, like the engine of a airplane or any sort of flying vehicle. They have done studies where it can actually stop a jet engine for a short period of time, long enough for it to go to crash. And it could also sink a ship because it causes the buoyancy to drop drastically because of separating oxygen molecules. But unfortunately for that theory, there is actually more methane hydrate in the Gulf, which is nearby the Bermuda Triangle. That part of the Pacific Ocean generally has a very low